Hey there, Pisces. Welcome to my channel. I am Isaac. We're going to get into your reading for September. And one of the things that immediately jumps out at me in this chart here will be your first house with Saturn and Neptune here in the first house in retrograde, along with Venus and Lilith. Lilith is this little symbol right here representing. Look, Lilith is kind of like the toxic desire, the thing you crave that ultimately makes things worse when you go for it, but you think you really want it. In the seventh house, um, there might be, you may be having a wee bit of an identity crisis. Maybe you have for a little while now. You might not think of it in that way, or maybe you do. But with Saturn and Neptune in retrograde in the first house, and Saturn being, and both of them being in Pisces, there's kind of this. So Saturn is the planet that draws boundaries around things. It takes the abstract, boundless sort of potential and gives it form, puts a boundary around it, gives it something a form to exist in. And you're not really sure what form you want to take because you've kind of got this natural sort of um, presence, which really everybody does. But for you, it's almost like you start out in the sort of state of consciousness that most people are trying to get to, but you don't recognize that necessarily. And maybe you don't value that because it's natural to you. And because pretty much every human on earth, other than like the enlightened few, we all have self worth issues. It's kind of like almost inherent in believing that you are a separate entity from your environment, that you're just a person walking around in this cold and unyielding environment that is separate from you. But that's an illusion. Um, and you kind of have this feeling of like, well, I don't want to be just a conscious presence floating through life. I want to be a somebody, but I don't know what that means. I don't know who I want to be. Who am I really? Um, well, who you are really is consciousness. You are the present moment. There is no difference between the present moment and you, um, because they're one and the same. You are your environment. You are what happens to you. There is no outside world versus inside world. It is one process happening, arising simultaneously. It is one thing. You are a bubble of consciousness, and that bubble, you could say that the outer edge of that bubble is your reality, and the center of that bubble is your perspective. It's all one thing. It's not a separate thing. It's just there's the conscious perspective in the middle, exploring itself from within. And then this process is also happening on the greater level where the universe, the creation itself, the one universal consciousness, that's what it's doing too. You could say it's not a bubble, it's a boundless thing, but for the sake of understanding for this conversation, imagine it's a bubble, a big bubble of consciousness, infinite potential, and it's exploring itself through many infinite numbers of perspectives, and that's what we are. We are each one perspective of the infinite one exploring itself from the inside. And we too are a reflection of that. So we are are unified beings, exploring ourselves from the inside with this conscious perspective. And in order to come to terms with that, you kind of have to go through a process. You have to kind of forget that that's what you are and become an identity, an individual perspective, and believe that you are uh, in, a separate being from your environment and that causes the development of an ego, an identity, the sense of this is who I am. This is the person I am. I like these things. I like to do this. I wear these things. This is my name. These are my, I like these foods. I like this music, and I like these people, and I don't like this. You come up with this list of things of likes and don't likes, basically, uh, and we identify with it. It becomes an identity. But you're kind of struggling with this process because there's too many options. There's too many potentials. There's too many. It's like if there is when you have millions of options in front of you, you kind of get like what's called choice paralysis. So I feel like I know this is kind of a weird reading already off the bat, but just bear with me. Um, it's like you have choice paralysis when it comes to who you want to be. You can be anything. You can choose to embody any identity. You have infinite potential. But the problem is you're trying to figure out which one is the most genuine without realizing the fact that they're all masks. There is no one identity. There is no genuine identity. There is just being. And so if you really want to be your true self, it's the way to do that is to not be anybody, is to be presence, to get rid of this mental construct of who you are and just be in the present moment. And then who you really, truly, naturally are emerges automatically. It's not something you have to calculate and figure out and create a list of things that you do and don't like. It's automatic. Your true self is woven into the fabric of your being. You don't have to do or try to do anything to be who you are. But you might be feeling like you're caught in this process of trying to be a certain type of person for the sake of attracting another type of person. Um, and so you start to get attracted to somebody else and want to be in a relationship with them. And then all of a sudden, this identity starts to change and mold and morph into what you think they want you to be, because what you're really seeking is a sense of validation, um, and love, because you're not recognizing your own inherent validation, your own inherent worth, just for the sake of existing as the being that you are. You're projecting that sense of worth onto an identity, um, a persona. But the persona is just a convenience. It's just a mask that you can use in order to interact with people. It doesn't have to be a permanent thing. The permanent thing is consciousness, awareness. You can exist as pure awareness. And in the moment when you need to embody a certain quality, you just do. You don't have to box yourself in any certain way. But I think maybe you feel like, but I want to box myself into an identity because it's more comfortable that way. It gives me a sense of security. I know who I am and what I need to do, and I don't want to live in this sort of anything goes sort of nebulous, uncertain reality. But unfortunately, well, it's not really unfortunate, but you might think it is at first. That's what reality is. It is an infinite sea of potentials that is being created in every single moment by you and your unconscious beliefs and thoughts about the world. And you may find that you begin to manifest whatever you identify. Like when you choose a certain, or you embody a certain type of identity, you start to manifest things in your reality that support that identity. And things can get really kind of chaotic when you're in this sort of like who am I mode, because your sense of self is constantly shifting, and so the universe is constantly shifting to show you, to reflect that different sense of being, those different states of being. So if things can start to feel really unstable, um, so it's almost like you don't want to have to live with infinite potential because it scares you. Um, Instead, you're searching for a solid, concrete identity to latch onto, so that things can make sense, can be a little more uh, logically navigatable, I guess you could say. And that's okay if that's what you want to do. That's totally your choice. However, I can tell you for certain that that is not where happiness will come from. Happiness does not come from predictability and the ability to easily mentally navigate your reality. That's not where happiness comes from. Um, Happiness comes from being in the present, uh, acknowledging that who you already are underneath all of that is already good enough. You're already good enough. And if you can learn to embody a state of mind where no matter what state of being you're in right now, that's good enough. All of a sudden, your state of being begins to change and transform. People fear that, well, they say, well, if I say that I'm good enough now as I am, then I'm not going to change anymore, and I'm just going to stay this person and this person that I feel like it's not good enough. That's not really how it works at all. In fact, when you feel like you're good enough as you are, that's when you change the most and become your true self. And it's funny, you stop trying to improve yourself, and all of a sudden everybody around you says, wow, look at how much that person's improving. But the more you feel like you need to improve yourself or change yourself in that way, the more you're affirming that who you are is not good enough. And uh, people kind of other people might look at you and say, they could really stand to improve themselves. So you're creating what you embody. And if you embody a state of being that says, I am good enough as I am, no matter what, all of a sudden your reality starts to reflect that with people who support you, people who genuinely love you for who you are, the things that you genuinely enjoy just by virtue of being who you are start to naturally be attracted to you and manifest in your world. So if you want to, play the identity game, you're welcome to do that as long as you want. But eventually you will find that there is no core identity because identity is just thoughts constructed out of beliefs, or an identity is a construct of beliefs created out of thoughts, I should say. Because what is a belief but a thought that gets repeated in your subconscious over and over and over again? Um, the more you can just embrace that sense of floating with no, and being in the middle of the ocean with no land in sight. That's kind of what Pisces, that's the energy of Pisces, is this boundless ocean of creation, of consciousness. The more you can embrace and accept that sense of sort of floating in a boundless reality and the vulnerability and and embrace that sense of vulnerability and the sense of not knowing what's going to happen next or not knowing what you need to do next, the more you can be okay with the not knowing, the better everything's going to go for you. And that may sound backwards. Um, but anyways, I kind of went off on a really long tangent about like a spiritual teaching rather than talking about the astrology. Anyways, this Venus conjunct Lilith in the seventh house in Libra. That's kind of where I got the idea of trying to be someone, like changing your sense of identity based on what you think this other person's going to love the most. But then you're really only showing them a sort of a constructed sort of false side of yourself. So then the person they fall in love with isn't really you, the real you. It's an idea that you've created. It's a mask that you've created. And eventually that starts to feel empty because you feel like they don't actually appreciate the real you. They only appreciate this false construct of a person that you created to show them. And you might feel like, oh, but that is who I am, at that moment. But then, as that, you might notice, just pay attention to, like, if you're in a relationship or if you have like a really big crush on somebody or whatever, notice how you change yourself and what you do and what you say and what you wear and how you feel about yourself based on this person's reactions to you, and you might see what I'm talking about. And the irony is that the more you just accept that you're good enough as you are and you don't need to present that mask or present any specific image, the more you just embrace who you really are just by virtue of being, the more you're going to attract people who really do appreciate the real you. And that's going to feel far more fulfilling than kind of almost tricking somebody into loving you by pretending to be what they want you to be, even though that's not what you're consciously meaning to do. That's kind of what ends up happening. There's a grand trine happening here. So a trine is a 90-degree angle between two planets. Or sorry, I think it's 60 degrees actually. Um, Anyways, either way, it makes a triangle. A grand trine is a trine. Sorry, I'm tripping over my own words here. Mercury's still in retrograde while I'm recording this. Anyways, a grand trine is basically when there's a triangle between three planets, and it represents an amplified flow of energy between those planets. And we already talked about this, with Venus and Lilith and what that represents. So Uranus in your third house in Taurus, um, you may feel like there's certain things that you don't say or things that you try to hold back because you're afraid that somebody else might think it's a little too weird. Um, and it's like you probably don't think consciously about this, with Pluto being in the 12th house back here, moving into Aquarius. It's just kind of a general feeling that you get where you almost like have certain thoughts that might seem too strange or weird, and it's almost like you suppress them without even thinking about it. It just happens automatically. It's not something you do on purpose. And you're going to have to pay close attention to how you react when you interact with certain people. These people whose approval and attention that you want. This person, and I get the sense that there's probably a partner or somebody you want to be your partner, and it's like you start to really mold almost, what you say, even what you allow yourself to think becomes influenced by this person's presence and this person's perception of you. And they probably would already like you for who you really are if you dropped all of this kind of identity seeking. But I don't think you believe that because you don't necessarily like, you don't value that part of yourself. You think that that's not good enough, and you need to change and become something different, something better. Um, but that's like I said, it's a never ending loop. If you feel like I'm not good enough, then you create a reality that reflects to you that you aren't good enough. And then if you believe the things that manifest, you're going to start to really believe even more that you're not good enough until you are able to pull back from that and begin to recognize your inherent worth just based off the fact that you exist. You are an aspect of creation. And because you exist and because you are an aspect of creation, you have infinite value. The entire concept of value completely is an abstract concept because all is one. And if all is one, then how can one thing be more valuable than the other? It's impossible. It's completely a relative thing that we create for ourselves, really in order to judge and measure ourselves against everyone else and everything else in our world, and ultimately causing nothing but pain for ourselves. Judge not lest ye be judged. Well, what that really means is that in the act of judging the value of other things and other people, you're actually judging yourself and the value. That's what judging really is. It's a value judgment. So, when you judge something, you judge it as either good or bad, valuable or not valuable. You assign a value judgment to it, and we do this to ourselves. And by doing that, you really create nothing but problems. Um, Anyways, I feel like I've kind of rambled on long enough with this one. We'll see. This is a new channel, so very few people probably even see this video. I'm going to go ahead and just end it here before I ramble on too much longer. If you're interested in a natal chart reading or a tarot card reading, just send me an email. My email address is down below. Hit the like and subscribe button if you like these videos. Thanks for watching. If you've watched this far and stuck with me through this ranting, rambly reading, thanks for watching and take care. Talk to you soon.